All right, let's talk about Brock Purdy, who just got a massive deal. And there's a lot of talk about, quarterback contracts and who deserves what and all that stuff. But first, and we'll talk about that at the end of this video. But first, let's just talk about Brock Purdy himself. How do we view him as a player? Because I do think there is some people disagree with him, right? You ask 100 football fans where would they rate Brock Purdy, you're going to get a decent amount of different answers. I think this play is kind of what a lot of people feel like when they watch Purdy happens a lot, which is it's a zone coverage concept. They're going to run play action and then have a receiver run over the middle. Okay, classic Shanahan stuff, right? Every team does this. Seems like no team calls play action better than Shanahan. You get the linebackers to move out of position with the play action, throw over the top of them. Simple enough. Watch as when Brock Purdy is going to run this play action, you see that right here there is not a huge window, but maybe an opportunity, right? You can see where a ball could be thrown in a way to make this a completion. And so first, you have the Shanahan scheme to give, Purdy an opportunity. And I think what Purdy does a very good job of is, as you see, he's going to hit that opportunity. And so his critics will say, hey, that was a Shanahan play. Shanahan was able to scheme things up. Sure, he did his job, but that's all he did was his job. Whereas the fans will say, hey, that's not the easiest play in the world to make. And if you can hit these at a high level, that's how you can have a very successful offense. But while this is the main thing people talk about with Purdy, I do think there are some other real positive traits with him that kind of don't get talked about as frequently. For example, this next one, where what's going to happen is it's going to be zone coverage, but it's going to be a zone blitz. And so what does that mean? Well, specifically, look at that player right there. That is George Kittle, and watch what he's going to do on this play because it's a blitz. Purdy takes a snap, and Kittle is going to be running a hot route, which is he's just going into a gap in coverage. At least I believe that's what's happening. I'm not in the huddle. Maybe that was just this play called by design, but I believe his job is, hey, it's zone. If it's a zone blitz like this, just run 6 yards, then turn around. Hopefully, we can just take advantage of there being an opportunity. But watch how Purdy sees him and is able to quickly make that throw and gets the ball to Kittle. He just reads the play quickly, and that's something that you like to see because, again, we all talk about, the Shanahan offense. It's so easy to run. Well, opposing teams are trying to get you out of your rhythm, and I think part of why Purdy works so well in this system is the fact that, yes, he can just run the offense by design, but a lot of quarterbacks can do that. I think he is a nice compliment in that when plays don't fully work, he can still find ways to add a ton of value. Something like this is a good example of it, where what's going to happen, because everyone views playmaking strictly as running and making things work that way, but that's not exactly how it works. So like this play, for example, it's zone coverage. That route, that's once again Kittle's route. That's a route that could potentially get open. That's where Purdy is going to initially look. And then over there's another concept that could work against this coverage. But really, you want to get the ball to Kittle. That's where Purdy is going to first look towards. So when this play begins, what happens? Well, Chicago's kind of all over Kittle. I mean, Kittle's maybe could get open eventually, but do you really want to lock onto this and wait for Kittle to get open? A lot of young quarterbacks would, and Purdy still is a young quarterback, even though we almost don't even view him that way because of the success that, the 49ers have had with him. But he still is a young quarterback. A lot of young quarterbacks would just lock on to Kittle. That is not what Purdy does. Instead, he very quickly gets over, and not just getting over to his next read, but he's just seeing the whole area right here. Who should you throw to in this situation? Well, the deeper route has Chicago players kind of all over it, but the more underneath route is open here. However, Purdy is about to get crushed right here. You see there's a defender running over trying to make a play, so a lot is going on, and Purdy kind of has to be comfortable in this chaos right here, but he very much is. Watch, he is able to get the ball to Juwan Jennings. They pick up some yards right there. That's not a Kyle Shanahan play, right? That is Purdy finding a way to make good things happen. And this is why I think they complement each other so well, is because Shanahan, he's Kyle Shanahan, right? He's going to scheme a lot of positives up. That's just kind of what he does. But you can maximize the value of that with a Jimmy Garoppolo, right? You don't need someone who's better than that. You don't need a $53 million quarterback to get those plays. What you need is someone who can get those plays and also add other valuable plays, and that's what Purdy does. In a situation like this, for example, where what's going to happen is it's a zone coverage concept. This is another, I think, important thing to talk about when we just talk about football in general. It's zone coverage. You have multiple routes that are going to be running deeper and over the middle. Okay, understood. Well, when Purdy takes a snap, he looks right over here, and you see, so that first route that's running deeper over the middle, not really that open. Lavonte David kind of has it covered, so it's going to be difficult to make that work. However, the next one is open, kind of, right? I mean, the linebacker who's covering this player, this is Ricky Purcell right here. The linebacker covering him has his back turned towards the quarterback, so he can't play the ball. You also have to get it there quickly enough that Lavonte David can't read the play and get over and cover two guys at once, right? Which can happen, so you have to be careful here. But Purdy reads the play, gets the ball there quickly, and they end up getting a touchdown out of that. There was no guarantee that a touchdown was going to happen. There was no guarantee a completion was going to happen. Was that a favorable situation because of Shanahan? Sure, that's not unfair to say. Shanahan called a play that allowed an opportunity like this to happen, but what Purdy did was he took advantage of those opportunities. Again, it all works together. And also heading over to something like this, so what's going to happen here is, so this is going to be a zone coverage concept, but it's a bit unique because, going up against Tampa Bay, Todd Bowles likes to mix a bunch of different things up. So what's he going to do here? Well, it still is a zone coverage play, but he's going to have a player kind of look as though he's blitzing, but you're going to have a defensive lineman drop back into coverage. That defensive lineman dropping back into coverage is Vita Vea, the monstrous interior defensive lineman who, okay, listen, he's a great athlete for his size, but it's just not a great coverage player, and the only reason you do this is to try and fool the opposing team. However, if you look at Purdy's kind of doing the mental math right here and saying, well, wait a second, if there's an interior defensive lineman who now has his back turned towards me trying to get back into coverage, it's zone coverage, there's a gap he's supposed to cover here. Watch as Purdy just steps up and he just runs to where Vita Vea was and picks up some yards with his legs. Purdy is someone who can use his legs in a very positive way, and he picks up a first down on that play. I mean, that's just smart football by Brock Purdy, and this is, again, one of the things that he brings to the table, that, not to keep comparing him to Jimmy Garoppolo, because, hey, they had success with Jimmy Garoppolo as well, but this is kind of the key difference, is that, Purdy gives you these plays while still giving you the other types of plays. Now, if we want to talk about negatives, I don't know if I would consider this a negative, but it is something to bring up, I think, which is, so it's a zone coverage concept. This is once again going to be a really clever Kyle Shanahan type of play, where that is going to be George Kittle's route, just the route to try and get the corner who's in the area to follow him. Move more towards the middle of the field. You can then have another player who's going to run to where hopefully that corner now isn't. Hopefully you can make a play work that way. That's how this is designed. This is Kyle Juszczyk who's going to be running down the field. Okay, understood. Well, when Purdy takes a snap, the play concept is working kind of as designed. I mean, there definitely is a window. You make a perfect throw, this could potentially be a touchdown, but with being a fullback, although calling Juszczyk a fullback is unfair because he can do so many other things, but he still is a fullback. You can't expect him to fully, take advantage of it here. But hey, a good throw and you can get a completion. Purdy is a bit under pressure here. He's having to throw a bit off balance. And essentially, he's just going to throw up a jump ball. And this just happens sometimes, where he's just going to give his receiver a chance, which sometimes really works, sometimes really doesn't. And that's kind of the key thing. So yeah, ultimately, I mean, again, we can do the discussion of, is it worth paying a quarterback who isn't Mahomes or Lamar Jackson or Joe Burrow or Josh Allen? Is it worth paying that guy that amount of money? But ultimately, I do actually think Purdy is an underrated player. I think that he does a lot of really nice things for San Francisco, and I get why they wanted to just make sure they didn't let him leave the building, I mean, I understand it. So, yeah, he should still be a very good quarterback in this Shanahan scheme for quite a while. But, yeah, that's what I think about all this. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Always love hearing from you. And, of course, as always, thanks for watching.